In March 2019, a fire broke out in the industrial area of Kearny Mesa, located in San Diego, engulfing the building of Off-Road Warehouse, one of the oldest auto parts suppliers in Southern California. The fire quickly spread through the office and warehouse spaces, causing serious damage to the structures. Fortunately, no one was injured. At the time of the fire, the building was empty, but the material damage was significant. Not only property was destroyed, but also internal documentation. The fire caused concern not only among the company owners and the insurance service. Local investigators and later federal agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, took note of some irregularities. An expert examination revealed that the source of the fire was in the office part of the building and showed signs of deliberate arson. Traces of an accelerant were detected. Investigators determined that the fire had been set intentionally, which immediately gave the investigation a criminal character. At the time of the incident, the company's management already suspected possible financial violations. Discrepancies began to appear in the reports, and the amounts in the company's accounts did not match the internal accounting data. The managers began to doubt the reliability of the financial information processed by an employee who had worked at the company for almost 10 years. Her name was Carrie Alice Hernandez, and she held the position of accountant. The fact that arson occurred in the building where all the company's accounting was done immediately aroused the investigators' suspicions. The question arose, was the fire set to destroy evidence? Soon this suspicion was confirmed. An investigation began, which would soon uncover not only the cause of the fire, but also a large-scale scheme of corporate embezzlement. After the fire was officially declared arson, federal investigators began to examine possible motives. The focus turned to a company employee, Carrie Alice Hernandez. At the time of the incident, she had been working at Off-Road Warehouse for nearly 10 years and had access to all internal financial operations. Her position as an accountant allowed her to issue checks, make transfers, and control the movement of funds. Investigators began by analyzing bank transactions and accounting records from previous years. It was discovered that from January 2015 to March 2019, more than $744,000 had been stolen from the company's cash register and accounts. The money was either transferred to accounts controlled by Hernandez or withdrawn in cash using forged financial documents. The investigation did not immediately establish the exact scheme of the thefts, but the accumulated data showed that all suspicious transactions had one thing in common. They were approved or processed through Carrie. Moreover, her behavior during and after the fire also raised questions. She began to avoid communicating with management, did not participate in discussions about restoring documentation, and evaded giving explanations. Federal agents began collecting witness statements, including from company employees and acquaintances of Hernandez. One of the key episodes is related to how she tried to mislead witnesses about her whereabouts and behavior on the day of the fire. In court, this episode will be used as evidence of her attempts to obstruct justice and provide false testimony. Taking into account the accumulated data, the investigation concluded that the arson was committed deliberately in order to destroy evidence. The fire in the office was an attempt to erase traces of years of embezzlement. Thus, the incident escalated from a domestic tragedy to a federal criminal case. The charges began to be formed based on specific amounts, documents, and the suspect's behavior. When the investigation gained access to the bank statements of Off-Road Warehouse, it became clear that the scale of the embezzlement was far greater than initially expected. Over 4 years, from early 2015 to March 2019, Carrie Alice Hernandez withdrew at least $744,000 from the company's cash register and accounts. This is confirmed by the official indictment and recognized by the court. The operations were carried out using a variety of schemes. Hernandez forged checks and processed fictitious payments. The funds were directed either to her personal accounts or through intermediaries. She used her access to the accounting systems to create false entries, fake recipient names, and fabricated justifications for expenses. Such actions could go unnoticed because control over financial transactions was concentrated in her hands. It is important to emphasize that the official court documents do not contain a complete technical description of the schemes, but the fact of the embezzlement was established based on accounting expertise, bank confirmations, and testimonies. The data indicate the deliberate and systematic nature of the criminal actions. This was not a one-time operation. It was a process that stretched over years. During the investigation, Hernandez repeatedly tried to distort the facts. She gave false explanations for her actions, denied her guilt, and misled investigators about her role in the company's financial system. These actions formed the basis for a separate charge of obstruction of justice and giving false testimony. The embezzlement led not only to direct financial losses. The losses undermined the stability of the business, necessitated a review of the entire reporting system, and dealt a blow to the company's reputation. Off-Road Warehouse found itself drawn into a serious crisis that could have been prevented if the scheme had been uncovered earlier. But it was the trust placed in a single employee that allowed the crime to continue for years. One of the key episodes in the case was the forensic examination, which proved that the fire in the off-road warehouse building had been set intentionally. Investigators from the ATF confirmed that the source of the fire was in the office area, and during the inspection, they found evidence of the use of flammable substances. This ruled out the possibility of an accidental fire. The way the fire spread indicated that the arson had been deliberately planned. Based on the evidence, the investigation determined that the arson was carried out by Carrie Alice Hernandez in order to destroy documents that could have revealed embezzlement. This motive became central to the charge of property destruction and also allowed the fire to be linked to an attempt to cover up a crime. Moreover, Hernandez's behavior after the incident confirmed the suspicions. She avoided contact with management, did not participate in the restoration of documents, and failed to provide explanations for a number of payment transactions. An interesting aspect emerged related to the external details of the investigation. In court, prosecutors pointed to witness testimonies describing the appearance of Hernandez's car, a black SUV with tinted rims. These details played a role in identifying her whereabouts at the time of the fire and contradicted the explanations she had provided. This episode became the basis for the charge of giving false testimony and strengthened the prosecution's case. Thus, the arson, which initially seemed like an act of desperation or sabotage, became the main piece of evidence proving not only intent but also Hernandez's willingness to destroy property in order to cover up a financial crime. The physical destruction of the office became additional evidence of her guilt, increasing the severity of the criminal case. This turn of events finally shifted the case into the realm of a federal investigation. Hernandez was now facing charges not only for embezzlement, but also for intentional arson, which endangered property and safety. The trial of Carrie Alice Hernandez lasted several days and concluded in April 2024. The federal prosecution presented evidence proving her guilt in embezzling more than $744,000 from her employer, Off-Road Warehouse, and in orchestrating arson to destroy evidence. She was also charged with obstruction of justice and giving false testimony. The prosecution presented bank documents, accounting records, and witness testimonies in court, including those of the company's owners and employees. Prosecutors proved that Hernandez had direct access to the company's funds, used their position to process fictitious payments, and signed checks that were not backed by actual transactions. The results of the ATF examination, confirming the fact of intentional arson, were also presented, along with evidence demonstrating her attempts to conceal the truth during the preliminary investigation. The jury found Carrie Hernandez guilty on all counts. In February 2025, the federal court sentenced her to 70 months in prison. This sentence encompassed responsibility for all the crimes: theft, arson, obstruction of justice, and perjury. The judge emphasized that, when passing the sentence, both the scale of the damage caused and the attempt to destroy evidence through arson were taken into account. It was also taken into account that the crimes were committed over several years, indicating their premeditated and systematic nature. The court's decision separately noted that Hernandez's actions undermined the trust between employers and employees, damaging the reputation not only of the company, but of the entire local business community. Thus ended the case that began with a fire and uncovered a complex scheme of embezzlement within a private business. The criminal prosecution became an example of how an outwardly reliable employee can act against the interests of their company for years. The total amount stolen by Carrie Hernandez from the off-road warehouse budget amounted to no less than $744,621. This figure is recorded in official documents of the U.S. Department of Justice and was announced during the court proceedings. The funds were withdrawn gradually over more than 4 years, from January 2015 to March 2019. The thefts were systematic and disguised as routine accounting operations. The investigation was able to partially determine exactly how the misappropriation of funds took place. Hernandez, using her position as an accountant, had direct access to the financial accounting system and could process payments on behalf of the company. She forged financial documents, including checks, and directed funds to accounts under her control. She also misled other employees by providing false reports and concealing the facts of the transfers. An important part of the scheme was its autonomy. Hernandez worked without any partners inside the company, carrying out all actions herself and not sharing her authority. This allowed her to maintain control over the process and avoid arousing suspicion. She enjoyed the complete trust of the business owners, which was never questioned until the accounting discrepancies became obvious. The court documents do not contain technical details of all the operations, but it has been established that a significant portion of the money was sent directly to accounts registered to Hernandez or to individuals connected to her. Additionally, according to the indictment, she cashed out funds and used them for personal purposes. Among the expenditures, there were recorded expenses that were disproportionate to her official salary. The fact of years-long embezzlement in a company that worked with thousands of clients was a shock not only to the management but also to the San Diego business community. The case demonstrated just how dangerous the lack of regular external audits and blind trust in a single employee can be. And it was precisely this trust that gave Hernandez the opportunity to carry out her criminal scheme. During the investigation and trial, federal prosecutors paid close attention to Carrie Hernandez's behavior after the start of the internal audit, and especially after the fire. It was established that she not only tried to destroy evidence, but also deliberately misled investigators, witnesses, and colleagues. This became the basis for charging her with perjury and obstruction of justice. One of the key episodes was her attempt to explain her whereabouts on the day of the fire. Hernandez provided false information about where she was and what vehicle she was driving. This information was refuted by witness testimony, as several people saw her black SUV with dark rims parked at the off-road warehouse office parking lot at a time close to when the fire started. Prosecutors specifically emphasized that even details such as the color of the wheels played a role in exposing her. In addition, she tried to present the company's expenses as legitimate transactions, claiming that the funds were used to pay contractors for their services. However, bank statements showed that the money was deposited into her personal accounts or withdrawn in cash without any supporting documentation. The court determined that Hernandez deliberately concealed the true nature of the transactions and created the appearance of normal accounting activity. It was also recorded that, in her communications with colleagues after the incident, she gave contradictory explanations, tried to cover her tracks, and avoided participating in the restoration of accounting records. Her behavior was characterized as an attempt to hinder the investigation and influence the course of investigative actions. The federal prosecutor emphasized that Hernandez not only committed a financial crime, but also took active steps to conceal evidence. This aggravating circumstance increased her liability and played an important role in the sentencing. The court took into account her attempts to manipulate evidence and use lies as a tool for defense. The fire set by Carrie Hernandez caused significant material and operational damage to off-road warehouse. The company's building in Kearney Mesa was severely damaged, including the office area where accounting and administrative documents were kept, as well as the warehouse facilities with auto parts. Although no one was injured, the business found itself in a critical situation. The destruction of infrastructure led to the suspension of some operations and disruption of supply chains. Immediately after the incident, the company was forced to deal not only with the police and the insurance company, but also with federal investigators. The investigation intensified the situation. The public accusation of employees of arson and theft caused a stir in the San Diego business community. For clients and partners, it became clear that the business had become embroiled in a high-profile criminal case. This affected the company's reputation and the trust placed in it. Alongside the physical damage, the company faced the need to reconstruct all financial documentation for previous years. The lack of backups and the destruction of originals required reaching out to banks, tax authorities, and third-party contractors to obtain information. These processes took considerable time and resources. The owner of Off-Road Warehouse publicly expressed regret and emphasized that the company would continue operating despite the damage sustained. However, according to the press, restoring the office and normalizing operations required significant effort. The financial consequences also included partial compensation for losses from the insurance company, but this did not cover the full extent of the damages. The incident prompted a review of internal control procedures. The company strengthened its auditing, introduced new rules for access to financial operations, and updated its data backup system. Management acknowledged that giving full control over accounting to a single person without proper oversight was a fatal mistake. Thus, Hernandez's crime affected not only her personally, but also dozens of employees, clients, and business partners involved in the company's operations. The Carrie Hernandez case became an example of how an employee who enjoys complete trust can inflict enormous damage on a company where they have worked for nearly a decade. After the investigation, trial, and sentencing, federal law enforcement agencies publicly announced their conclusions, summarizing one of the most illustrative cases of abuse of trust in the small business sector. In its official statement, the U.S. Department of Justice indicated that Hernandez deliberately used her position as an accountant to steal funds and then resorted to arson to destroy the evidence. According to the investigation, her actions leave no doubt about the premeditated nature of the crime and her desire to avoid responsibility. The court also noted that she actively obstructed the investigation by giving false testimony and distorting the facts. The 70-month prison sentence handed down in February 2025 was the result of a comprehensive indictment: embezzlement, destruction of property by arson, obstruction of justice, and perjury. This sentence served as a signal to businesses about the need for stricter financial controls. In an official press release, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California emphasized that Hernandez's crime undermined not only the company's financial stability but also trust in the small business management system as a whole. He noted that such cases highlight the importance of transparency and regular external audits. After the verdict was delivered, Hernandez was taken into custody and sent to a federal correctional facility. The court did not consider parole at the time of sentencing, taking into account the totality of the charges and the duration of the criminal activity. The story ended with her imprisonment, and for the company, a long road to recovery. This case became part of the Federal Judicial Archive and was used as an example at educational seminars for the business community about the importance of internal security and financial controls. The criminal case against Carrie Hernandez left a long-lasting mark not only on Off-Road Warehouse's financial system but also on its reputation. Although the company continued its operations, its name appeared for months in news reports and court records related to arson and years-long embezzlement. Local San Diego outlets, including NBC and Times of San Diego, covered the proceedings in detail, emphasizing the scale of the deception and the deliberate nature of the crimes. For the company's regular clients, suppliers, and partners, this became a serious test of trust. The reputational losses are difficult to quantify in monetary terms, but they manifested in the need to conduct informational clarifications, change communication strategies, and restore partners' confidence. A brand that had been built over decades was put at risk because of the actions of a single employee. The company's management did not make any public statements in the media, except for official comments within the framework of the court proceedings. However, according to the press, in the following months, Off-Road Warehouse implemented internal changes, introduced dual control systems for payments, updated internal audit standards, and instituted external audits. Local business associations cited this case as an example at conferences dedicated to cybersecurity, financial protection, and personnel management. Companies were advised to review procedures involving sole access to financial instruments, even if the employee is considered trustworthy. This case also became the subject of separate analysis in legal circles. The combination of economic crime, an attempt to destroy evidence through arson, and manipulations by the accused gave the case special significance. Federal law enforcement agencies used it as an illustration of how small businesses can become vulnerable in the absence of structured control mechanisms. Thus, even after the verdict and conviction, the consequences of Hernandez's actions continue to affect Off-Road Warehouse, confirming that reputational risks can be just as devastating as direct financial losses.